of the University of Vancouver Medical School. She's from the right side of Canada and is migrated to the left side of Canada. So that's all I'll say, because otherwise the geography gets complicated. She did her research having to do with baroreceptors, cardiovascular baroreceptors, and physiologic changes there. So she spent her life teaching and instructing and educating medical students and people in the medical center about cardiovascular physiology. And I was amazed at the work that she's doing that involves creative endeavors and the intersection between art and medicine, which people often, and I will say mistakenly, think of as mere science. And I want to say that it's not just the art and creativity for art and creativity's sake, but for the sake of facilitating some amazing learning. And I think that you'll be able to see that. So please help me welcome Dr. Courneya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lauren. It's just, no, you know what, I'll keep the lights up, Lisa, and then when we start with images, that would be great. So thank you, Lauren. And I might add that I met Dr. Barron in Italy in a course on medical humanities not quite a year ago. And there was an instant connection between the two of us. And this is a follow-up to that. But I'd like to start, and I would really like to extend my thanks to Dean Lee Nort, because really it was so generous to be brought to Waco to be able to give this talk, and also to Dean Ken Wilkins, who came to the luncheon today and was a big supporter of this. So thank you very much. Also, just to the whole College of Arts and Sciences, and in particular the Medical Humanities program. Oh my goodness, you are so lucky to have a medical humanities program run by such an amazing person. Really, it's just such a, I've had such a warm welcome here. Sue Moffat as well, I don't, if Sue is here, has been so hospitable. And a very special thank you, especially to come back out again to the students in the Visual Arts and Healing program. We had so much fun today. You can ask them later if that's really true, or just that I had so much fun, but I sure had fun. Anyway, are there any people here who are Irish? Excellent. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. It's a picture that I took in Ireland not quite a year ago, and I'm half Irish, and I married a man who is fully Irish. So that's just a happy St. Patrick's Day to you. So I'm showing you this picture because this was drawn of me by a student in one of my undergrad science classes, and I show it to you because it really describes exactly who I am. I teach, I love photography, and I teach cardiovascular science. And so when this picture was given to me, I said, I never need another intro to who I am. This is exactly who I am, and the hair is pretty accurate too. But what I'm really here to talk about is the intersection, the links between medicine, art, and learning. And I'll get the lights now, thanks Lisa, down just so that the images show up a little bit better. So what I'd like to do is describe to you a program that Dr. Barron alluded to, and it's called the Heartfelt Images for UBC Medicine and Dentistry. And it started 17 years ago with my idea that if I gave medical and dental students cameras, and while I spent 5 weeks of the first year of their medical program teaching them about the heart, if I just gave them the opportunity to conceptualize what they learned artistically, that I kind of had this inkling that maybe they would take it and run with it. And along the lines, it became known as the Heartfelt Images. And so I'd like to introduce you by way of images to a few of the things that the medical, so these are art, this is art made by medical students, and I'm just going to give you a flavor of some of the things. So we'll start with some photography. So that's an image called Eat Your Heart Out by Mila Semproni, and it is not only anatomically accurate, but it's made by, everything in there is a heart-healthy food. So it's not just that it was accurate, it was that everything in there had to take some thought by Mila to decide what, she could put a Cheeto in there or something, but she didn't. She chose heart-healthy foods, and she called it Eat Your Heart Out. Here's another image that I'm very, very sweet on. And so Barbara, who is in we have a distributed medical program in 4 sites across the province, and one of them is on Vancouver Island, and she actually lives on a farm on Vancouver Island, so she has bees. So she actually, how brave is this? She took the beehive drawer out and she carved a heart into the honeycomb, and she called it Sweetheart. This is an image next, is an image that was on the poster that Dr. Barron distributed. And I show you this because every year we celebrate the arts and humanities at the UBC medical program with a gala that actually is a fully auditioned performance art of every kind, musical and dance and poetry, slam poetry, everything you can imagine in performance. And so Michael Fang, who is one of our dentistry students, went to the gala, and he took all of those individual pictures, and then he collaged it into a heart, and he called it the heart of medicine and dentistry. So I like that just on so many levels, because it not only celebrates visual art, but it's a real testament to the performance art in the UBC medical program. Here's another image that I'm quite fond of called Heart Healthy Habits. So tonight when you have your glass of red wine, you can feel quite good about it. And Evan Weens is actually a dental student, and that was just about the time in the evolution of our art contest where people were going into PowerPoint and post-production kind of imagery. So that is actually an image of the wine being poured into the glass, but then he was able to do some post-production with it. So some of you have seen the next image in person, but about 2 or 3 years after I started the photography contest, cardiac contest, students started asking if they could bring things in that were other than photographs. So this is something called Soft Hearted, which is an anatomically perfect 3-dimensional knitted heart by Andrea Miners. And I actually have it here, so at the end of the presentation, if you're a knitter and you want to have a look at it, you can come up and see it. But the first person to ever come in my office with something that wasn't a photograph was Maya Geddes on the left-hand side, and that was an oil painting. So over the 5 weeks of my teaching about the heart, Maya was at home creating this oil painting that was a semi-abstract of the heart, with the heart being a cello, with the concept of the heart that makes sound. And then, down the line, there have been other paintings. That's the Clinical Artery by Rita Shaw, which incorporated the stethoscope into the coronary arteries. There have been sketches. So on the left is a sketch, a pen and ink sketch that represents an arrhythmia called atrial flutter. And on the right was made by April Liu, and it was an homage to her Asian heritage and called Turbulent Flow. So you can see that this went way beyond photographs into letting the medical students and dental students truly just be as creative as they could possibly be. Then, some of them are just funny. I mean, come on. The heartbeats by, she made the clothing for the beats. That's all I'm saying. The Heartbeats by Becky Chan. But what I wanted to introduce you to was this concept of transmediation. And essentially, in text, it would be going from one sign system to another. But really what the whole concept behind this is, if you take some information that you see in text, and if all you do is try and remember what you read by the text and later try and recall the information, you will be able to recall some, maybe all of it. But if in the meantime, after you've read it, you actively try and do something with the text, do a sketch, paint it, create a photograph, if you actually make something that's not textual, you will remember the information because you're doing even in a better way because it's generative learning. You're actually creating new meaning and it's activating different parts of your brain in the doing of that. And so that's what I want to introduce you to in a series of quick images now. So what I showed you originally are just some really beautiful images from Heartfelt Images. But this is why partly why I do this, is for the transmediation. So there is a kind of, for those of you who have a medical background, there is an arrhythmia of the heart called polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. And if I was to show you an electrocardiogram, that's actually what polymorphic ventricular tachycardia would look like. And it's a series of heartbeats, but graphically on an ECG, they're all different shapes and sizes. They're happening really, really close together, tachycardia. And so when Brad Ashman looked at polymorphic ventricular tachycardia, he saw it as that at a marina. And for him, that was polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. And I've used Brad's image so many times now when I'm teaching about polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. I say, this is what it looks like on an ECG, but imagine a marina and think of polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. And Brad still uses, for him, that is the image, and it's locked into his brain. Ventricular fibrillation, that's an electrocardiogram of a complete electrical chaos in the heart, where there is no longer synchronized beating and relaxing. It's simply electrical chaos. And when I teach about that, and most medical doctors teach about ventricular fibrillation, they say, it's like a bag of worms. That's what your heart is like. If you looked inside the pericardial sac, the heart would no longer be beating, it's quivering. And every physician teaching it will say, it's like a bag of worms. So Maureen Penzin saw it this way. She created her own ventricular fibrillation with sugared worms and called it sweet fibrillations. So she made that translation to an image from the concept. So now we're going to get into some physiology. Oh my God. So that's the way I would teach something called preload. And in preload is really just the concept that the more blood you bring back to the heart, the more it's stretched out before it contracts. And so the harder it will beat and eject the blood back out. That's what preload is. So the more blood that comes back to the heart on the right side, the bigger it becomes, the harder it contracts, the more it pumps. And this is how 2 of the medical students saw preload. They just drew it in the sand on the beach in Vancouver. There's the dump truck bringing the blood back to the right side of the right atrium, and then the traffic moving through the heart, and then eventually ejecting it out of the aorta. So again, I use that when I'm teaching about preload because it's such a lovely, powerful image. So that's where I'm going to leave Heartfelt for the time being, but sort of, not really. But mostly, what I would like to do now is tell you 2 stories. And they both of them start with Heartfelt, but for me, the power of Heartfelt Images has been where it has gone since the students participated in this contest at UBC. So let me start by introducing you to Michiko Maruyama. At the time, she was a first-year medical student in the class. She's now a resident in cardiac surgery, and I think ultimately you'll be able to see why. But Michiko Maruyama, and it's important that you know that she's half Irish and half Japanese. It becomes important in this story. Michiko heard about the Heartfelt Images contest and was, I guess, percolating in her mind about it, but sitting in a lecture that I was giving or someone else was giving about the heart, and that's her note. That's a page of her notes. And I wish I don't have a I should have got a laser pointer. Does anybody have an, a legal one? No, okay. So this is actually the sketch in her notes. And the way she described it later to me was, I was watching this image of the heart, and 4 animals in my peripheral vision just started to kind of be there. And she said, I was kind of paying attention to the lecture, but then these animals were playing together, and they eventually came together and they formed a heart. And so she drew it, and let me show you the animals. There is a whale here, a fox, a seal, and a bird. And they all came together and formed this beautiful, completely accurate, anatomically, a heart. This is sorry, I'm going to get geeky and cardio on you. The sinoatrial node, the atrioventricular node, the interventricular septum, the Purkinje fibers. There's the mitral valve. This is the tricuspid valve. This is the pulmonary artery and the aorta and all the branches and the pulmonary veins. And so every bit of that is accurate. So imagine how well she must have understood her anatomy in order to pull that together and create such a beautiful anatomically accurate image. And this is what it looked like when it was finished. And she called it the spirit of the heart. That was the name of that. And that year, it won the grand prize for Heartfelt Images. So that's where Heartfelt came into it. But there's so much more now. So as it turned out, she put that on a business card. And that summer, she was at her uncle's landscape architecture office doing some work when this man walked in. And Clarence Mills is an internationally known, one of our First Nations, Haida First Nations artist. And he saw Michiko's business card on the landscape architect's desk, because it was her uncle was the landscape architect. And he said, who did this? And Ron said, well, that's my niece, Michiko. And he said, I have to talk to her. And he said, oh, she's right in the other room. So I'll bring her out. So Michiko came out. Remember, Michiko is Japanese and Irish. She has no history or any connection whatsoever to the First Nations culture. And Clarence just said, you have to tell me how you did this image, because everybody looks at it in Vancouver and they say, oh, it's a Haida heart. But when she did this, it had nothing to do with Haida art. It was her own, when she did Spirit of the Heart, it was her own Japanese and Celtic culture that formed that first image. But once she met Clarence, they decided they would have to work together to create some other art. And in the meantime, he taught her that summer. She became his very first ever protege, and he taught her how to do a hand-pulled limited edition run of the Spirit of the Heart. And that run has been all over the world now. There's physicians all over the world that have Spirit of the Heart limited edition print hanging in their office. But Clarence and Michiko decided they had to work together, and I'm just going to, again, show you what's happened since. So in one of these sessions, Michiko said, draw me a frog. Draw me what would be a frog in the Haida culture. So that's an original sketch by Clarence of a frog. And then he said to Michiko, because what Michiko wanted to do was now not have, in addition to the Spirit of the Heart, she wanted to do something about the liver. So she said, let me take that and do something with it. So that was Michiko thinking now of the frog, but now as a liver. And bear with that for a second. So the frog, which is in the Haida culture, the healer, it's one of the healer animals. So that's the start. And then that was taking it a little bit further now. Now you can start to see the 3 lobes of the liver, but it's a starfish. It's a starfish, and the reason she chose a starfish is because starfish regenerate if they lose part of themselves, and so do livers. And on top of that, the gallbladder became a sea urchin. So that was her next step of adding into this idea, or sorry, it was a salmon roe, not a sea urchin. It was a salmon egg that became the gallbladder. And so she called it Jada because it was both a Japanese and a Haida fusion, that nobody's ever done that before. It was a completely new art form, and it was in collaboration with Clarence. And the final image that I'm going to show you is now the final version of the spirit of the liver. So you can still see the frog, and you can see the gallbladder, and that's actually a bile duct there, the little extra little circle. And there's the arteries that come into the liver and the veins and then leave the liver. So I think that's pretty fun and amazing that something that was just a first-year med student project hooked her up with Clarence Mills, and now they're co-creating art. And they have another image that's underway right now called The Spirit of the Lungs, and it's actually a thunderbird with its wings up, which is going to be gorgeous when it's done. So Michiko also doodles. And this is an article that I actually interviewed her about her medical doodles, and this was a published article in the Canadian Medical Association Journal in their Humanities section. And let me tell you a little bit about the doodles. So Michiko is such a visual learner, and so every day she would go to medical school and she would learn all sorts of information, and at the end of the day she would go home and she'd integrate all of her learning onto a very small index card, and with colored pencils she would do this doodle. And so this is an example, a bit more of a close-up example of some of the doodles. And that would represent a whole day. That, something that took the whole day to learn, she would put into this doodle. That's the other part of her doodle. So those are her notes. So when you guys are writing or typing, she would be the person in the front, like with these funny little index cards doing stuff. So she would then take keywords from her notes and go home and she would create a doodle. So that's what it would look like. There's what I learned today, and that's how I see it as a doodle. And it became, people kept looking over her shoulder and say, can I see your doodle on, on the heart or the GI system, because it's helping me learn. So she created her own website called artoflearning.ca, and where that's just a picture of the first page. And med students from all over the world now link on to her website, and they help themselves learn medicine by looking at the literally hundreds and hundreds of doodles that she made in med school. Again, that to me, just starting from that encouragement of this student to do a piece of art in first-year medicine and all the ways that that is spread out. So let me introduce you to another student, and his name is Cyrus McEachran. He was in first-year medicine, and this was his this on the left was his heartfelt image. So he faced the camera, and he drew with his otoscope, or ophthalmoscope. He just drew with the light facing the camera, and then he photoshopped the color in, and then he photoshopped himself in at the last stage. So the left one is called Lighthearted, and then the next year when he was learning about the brain, he did Lightheaded as its corollary. So that's cool, that's Cyrus, and that was a pretty cool image. The other image that he made that year for Heartfelt Images was this image. And this was a friend of his in first-year medicine. Her name was Eva Markvert. And Eva is a double lung transplant recipient with cystic fibrosis. And she did body art as just her own artistic expression. She was in university at the time. And so Cyrus said, I've got this project, and I really want to do a photograph. Would you be a model for me, and could, I'll submit it for Heartfelt. So she did her own body art. He photographed her. And at that time, Eva had she was a year out from her double lung transplant, and they were doing a documentary of her both prior to transplant and after transplant. It was called 65 Red Roses. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but the documentary was amazing. And she was called 65 Red Roses because when she was a little girl, she couldn't say cystic fibrosis. So she said 65 Red Roses. And so that was what they called the documentary. And red was her favorite color, so 65 Red Roses. But she loved this image so much. And the documentary was coming out. And she also had this amazing blog called 65 Red Roses, which chronicled her whole transition from pre to post transplant. She loved the image so much that that became the promo for the whole documentary. It won awards all over North America at the film festivals, and that was the image that was everywhere across North America to celebrate Eva Markford. They had so much fun doing this project together that Eva said, what if I got 6 of my friends who are transplant recipients and we do body art and photograph them and auction the images off to raise money for transplant awareness. So I'll just let you look through those. So Eva did all the body art, and each of these people had whatever organ you're seeing on there, had that organ transplanted. And they made a lot of money. And I'm very sad to tell you that Eva died a year later, but that particular transplant campaign and all of those images are they still show up all over the place as ways to raise money for transplant awareness. So again, started as a funny image in a contest, but had amazing, amazing reach out into the world. And I'll also tell you briefly about this other project that I have. It's called the White Coat Warm Art. And so every year, it's been going on 7 years now, every year we call all medical students and residents and practitioners from across the country in Canada. And associated with one of our big national meetings, we have an exhibit that is just of art by medical students or practitioners. And so I'll show you a couple of pieces. So it could be of anything, any discipline, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be cardiac. So there's one by a radiation therapist, and he called this the self-portrait. So that one is, has a particular medical focus, but it doesn't always have to be medically focused. This is by Matthew Kennedy of his grandmother who had Alzheimer's disease. And every time I look at it, I just think, for me, that is just such a very, very special image of a woman that's struggling with conscious understanding. I love that image. So here's another piece of art that was shown at the White Coat Warm Art exhibit a couple of years ago. It's by Taryn O'Neill. It was called Anatomy, Piecing It Together. So it looks like an MRI, that's why it was created. But I'd like to show you some detail. Everything on that image is an individually hand-rolled piece of paper. Everything in the image. Piecing it together. And it took her a year to do it, over the first year of her medical program. And she told me that there were elements of it that she realized were wrong after she learned about it. So as she was making it from books and things, and then she actually went to some of the neuroanatomy lectures and went, oh, oops, that wasn't correct. She took it apart and redid it. So it was anatomically as accurate as possible. For those of you who think this might end just with medical students, I am here to tell you, because this year I ran this project just with dental students. So I wanted to show you some of the dental cardiac art. And so this is actually the student. This is obviously false teeth. And the student, sorry, I want to go back. The student carved that into a false tooth and painted it so she could always tell her patients the link between dental health and cardiac health. So that's going to be in her office, actually. the PQRST prep made by another dental student. Again, very interesting, and a lot of the dental art was about hand-eye coordination. That was done by Matthew by hand to illustrate the incredible precision necessary to be a dentist. And then the last thing, I'm going to leave you with just a little bit of a broader thought, which is when the students enter the national art exhibit called White Coat Warm Art, we actually asked them to submit an artist statement, and myself and some colleagues took hundreds of the artist statements, and we did a qualitative analysis of everything that the art student or the medical students were telling us why they did art. And on the top, word cloud, and if you've never seen them before, you probably have, in Wordle, if the word is big, it means it was said over and over and over again. The smaller the word, the fewer times it was mentioned. So those were some of the big concepts that the medical students said in answer to, why do you do art? Why do art if you're a medical student? And interesting, at the bottom, we asked them just to talk about their training, their medical training. So, you know, I think it's kind of interesting that there were, I mean, there's lots of wonderful things also about how fantastic medical school is and medical training. But you could see that what they were saying was within the training, there was frustration and stress. And they went to art to alleviate or to give them that parallel universe that they could live in, to either think about the stresses of their training or to work through it. And the actual, that was just a visual image, but what we then did was this qualitative analysis. And what we found was that there were 8 major themes to what their artist statements said. And you can see the list of them. They said it helps enhance their learning. It helps them escape constraints of training. It helps them balance their life and work. It's surviving. Like students said, this is surviving for me. It helps them express their self-identity, but also it helped them with their emerging professional identity as doctors. It helps them bear witness to the suffering of others. I thought that was very, very interesting. It helps them heal, and it helped them heal other people. And it helped them advocate for change. So some people used art and art projects as a way to make change and, you know, be socially aware. So I leave you with a beautiful image and all of my thanks for inviting me to come and speak with you today and share heartfelt images with you. Thank you.
Would you be willing to take some questions?
Of course I would. Sure. Are other people, I'd be so interested to know if other people are using that intersection of art and science or art and medicine in any way. If you are, I would love to know about it.
I like to take notes in a sketchbook rather than online paper. It's a little easier, more malleable.
And so are they images or simply words in the sketchbook, or do you doodle, or do you draw?
It's words and drawing, so
nice.
kind of both.
Nice. Thank you. Yes?
I was in human physiology last year, and I would do that. I would take notes, and then I would draw all my notes to try to memorize all the parts.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
I bet my notes from university look a lot like what your notes look like. There's someone right at the back, put their hand up. Oh, there's 2 people. So first you, and then right behind you. Okay, you're first. Right, 3rd row, and then we'll go right behind you after that.
Do you ever do any musical art?
Yes. I mean, it's harder for me to show because then I have to play you an entire piece of music. But I wish I could, I think it would be a bit complicated to pull it up right now. But one of the dental students in this past semester, who is a salsa dancer, got the entire UBC Salsa Club, and they did a salsa dance in the shape of a heart to the most fantastic music. It was called The Rhythm of the Heart. And I've had other people compose original pieces of music. One in particular that I can think of, the student used only sounds that come from, if you were in a busy ICU and all the monitors, she actually got individual tracks of the sounds that monitors make, and she put it together into a score and made it a piece of music. So yes, thank you for asking. And then right behind you.
As an artist, I did some heart-related artwork after some heart problems 30 years ago.
You did yourself?
Yeah.
And do you still have them?
Yeah.
Would you share what media you used?
That was pastel drawing.
Lovely.
Particularly some smaller prints.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could you talk for me about that word survival? The word that came up, you said one of the 8 themes.
Mm-hmm.
Could you expand on that a little more, or riff on that about, you know, for those here who haven't been in medical training, maybe, I mean, what does that mean, survival?
What it made me think of when I read the artist statements, most of the students that were talking about survival were students in the 3rd year of the medical program, where they did that transition from first two years, which are quite structured and have small group learning and lectures and labs, into that 3rd year of the program where you're on the wards and you're going from rotation to rotation, and you're sleepless, and you are on shift work for the first time, and you're now expected to know things that you come on to a new rotation, you know nothing, and people are all around you are saying, did they teach you nothing in medical school? What's this and what's this? And asking you for differentials. And students talked about how, you know, at some point in gen surge rotation, all I wanted to do was survive it. And so I went to art to help me do that. So those were the kinds of statements, which was, I'm so overwhelmed at the moment with this very challenging new kind of learning, being at the low point on the pole again, and I just wanted to keep my eyeballs above water. And so I wrote in my journal, or I sketched, or I painted, or I went to the piano and I played the piano just to survive it.
So is it escape? Is
Yeah.
it respite? Is it antidote? Is it...
It's both. So that was a very interesting distinction, because some students said I had to escape the pressure of what I was doing, but other students said I had to process it. I didn't want to escape it. I just had to go somewhere and go into a place inside myself with my art, and it was in that space that I was able to just figure it out, to process what I was going through. So it wasn't an escape for them. It was a place to go to process.
Would there be any other place? Would there be any other place you could think of for reflection for students, or any other ways that they're encouraged to reflect on what they're going through in their clinical rotations? Or my own experience has to do with having 0 time to do reflection.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm intrigued by that.
Well, I can only give you an example from my own medical school. So we're in a huge curriculum renewal, just started this year. It took the whole last 20 years of medicine training and said, let's do something brand new. I was a new dean. It was great. But I will point out that part of one of the things that I'm most proud about, I had nothing to do with it, so I can be proud of it. It's called Flex. It's a course that we have in the medical program, and it's all 4 years of the program. So no longer, everything I've shown you, that was extracurricular. Students didn't get any incentive for doing that. They just did it because they wanted to. But we now have a program in all 4 years where the students can do whatever they want and get curricular get grades for it, and it actually counts. And one of the ways that that course is assessed is through a portfolio. So they go and do all these different projects, but they're accountable because they have to produce a portfolio, and there's people that are trained to assess the portfolio for academic and creative content. So I guess I can say, I see what you're saying, which is if you're a busy medical or dental student, you don't have any time to do reflection maybe, but now it's part of the course. So it's good.
You've told me some examples of what some of the students are doing. Could you share some examples?
Well, there's a literary project that's happening right now with a student who is both interested in psychiatry and interested in writing. So he's spending 6 half days right now shadowing a bunch of psychiatrists, and he's reading 6 different memoirs, one of each particular psychiatric illness. So people that have that illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, depression. So he's reading these memoirs, he's shadowing a physician, and then there's another block of time that's coming up in May for 6 weeks, and he's going to write 6 short stories. Like he's just going to use his own literary creativity and write 6 short stories. So that's one example. I can also share with you another project that I am supervising with a group of 7 medical students. So we're together going to Nepal in May. And these students, it's a project I've had for over a decade, working with a medical school in Patan, which is a suburb of Kathmandu in Nepal. And these 7 or 8 students are going to come with me to Nepal, and they're going to do 2 research projects in an orphanage there related to the medical school. And so they were expected to create a whole set of tutorials to work with it's a 3-part project. They're going to work in the medical school and be tutors for the Nepalese medical students. They're going to be in the orphanage creating a health card project for all the children in the orphanage. And they're also going to do a photo voice qualitative data analysis of the children in the orphanage own conception of what health is. So that's an international flex project. So, yes? The first few years, people were, once they started seeing some of the art, there was actually a bit of a scare factor where students would say, oh, there's no chance I'm submitting my piece of art, because look what people are doing. Until one year, somebody who had never done any art whatsoever just took a picture, and it won the contest. And I didn't point out, the students in the class know that the prizes for this contest are $300 master cardiology stethoscopes. So there is a bit of an incentive in Heartfelt. But you know, that was the point where everything changed, because then students started to realize, I can just take my iPhone and take a picture. And if my artist statement and what I take has real creative reflection about what I've learned in cardiac, I could win this amazing contest. And so all of a sudden then people, I mean, our numbers swelled after that. They sat around 50 submissions, they went up to 200. You know, because we have a class of 300, by the way. So yeah, there was resistance and there was an intimidation factor. And then students started to say, what the heck? You know, I'm going to submit what I can do and see what happens. And so things changed then. Yes?
Has any more faculty developed something similar, or is this kind of specific to your project?
The image that I showed you by Cyrus McEachran of lightheaded, the neuroblock does the same thing, but it was as a result of Heartfelt. The students had just finished first year and were going into second year, and they came to me and said, can you help us do something in the brain and behavior block? And I said, sure. So they started their own art contest in the brain and behavior block and called it Making Connections. And so the art is amazing, and it's all either psychiatric or neuroanatomical. So, yeah. Yes, Lisa.
Have you ever given this presentation at an American medical school? And if so, what was the reception there?
You know what? Michiko Mariyama and I were flown to, which university? I'll think of it. I'm blanking at the moment. But we were brought down to give a joint presentation on the use of arts in medicine. And it was a massive, big group of people in science and in medicine. The reception was amazing. And people, I think they started to do some more in medical humanities as a result of part of what we talked about. So yeah, we've been warmly received at least one other place. So it was in South Carolina. Yeah, it was amazing.
I know you have a beautiful gallery of images on your website where they're all archived.
Yeah.
What about, does the art hang anywhere? I mean, is it displayed in the halls of the medical school? And if so, could you tell us about that?
So because there were so many submissions, we couldn't, the websites where they all live. But we take the top 3 winners every year, if they're images, and we frame it, and there's a whole hallway in the medical school called the Heartfelt Hallway, and it's now 15 framed images side by side. Each one contain the top 3 winners. I just wish I could show you all of them. There was one, it's called If the Heart Was Designed by IKEA, and the title is Hijarta, those crazy IKEA names. And it's actually a series, it's like, if you know those instructions you get, it's that. Only how to build a heart. It's amazing. So that's what Heartfelt Hallway is like. Sometimes they were just the winners of the contest, and then sometimes they didn't win the contest, but I pulled rank, and I just framed them anyway, because it was like Hijarta, come on, that was amazing. I thought everybody should see that. And the only thing that I'm sad about is that you actually need a swipe card to get where the medical students are in our building, so it's not really open to the public to see. However, kind of what you were alluding to, Lisa, is that one year there was a massive cardiology conference happening in Vancouver, and somebody called me up and said, "You do that sort of heart art stuff. Could you come to the conference and show us some?" So I just had the guys come and take all the art off Heartfelt Hallway, and I got 12 easels, and I put them up in the exhibit hall of the cardiology conference, and the cardiologists just lost their minds. They wandered around that art, and what was most joyful for me would be that they would come by once, and I could see them, they would be looking, oh, and then they'd leave, and a few minutes later, they'd come back with somebody else, and they go, "Check this out, look at this one." And it just swelled and swelled, and lots of people came by. So now I've probably done about 8 cardiology conferences around Canada now, where they've just said, we want to see this art. We want to see students doing this. So it's happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
If you have questions you'd like to talk to Dr.